Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Stillwater #1, a new series by Image Comics and Chip Zdarsky, Ramón Perez, and Mike Spicer, which to me is like a 3 out of 3 in terms of a creative team. We reviewed all of these people before. Zdarsky and Perez are the co-creators of this series, with Zdarsky doing the writing, Perez doing the cover and the artwork, and Mike Spicer doing the coloring. I really like Mike Spicer as a colorist. Perez is an awesome artist to begin with as well. And then Zdarsky, I've always found a good writer who's like able to weave these dramatic moments while also having a strong sense of fun to a lot of his storytelling, even in a story like this, which is not all fun and games. It's a pretty fun book overall, and one that I think I'd recommend. Oh no, that is what the image looks like. The framing on it looks a little funny because there's that white margin on the side there, and I thought it was wrong, but now that I'm even looking at the page, that is because we're looking at the centerfold, so that's why. Yeah, so I was pretty excited going into this book, and I have to say I wasn't disappointed, even though I was just a smidge worried because I was kind of falling into the trap that I was talking about in other reviews of various indie comics we've done recently, where the like #1 book as a floppy just on its own is a little hard to judge an indie series by. I think this one is pretty good. It is setting up a series, so I can only say so much in that regard, but it presents a pretty cool mystery, some quite creepy moments on the whole. I don't want to give away too much yet, but I do think it's a pretty solid book and worth checking out. Now, with that in mind, let's kind of go over the comic with a bit more of a closer lens, but I do think it's a pretty solid book that exists in a genre somewhere between like mystery, horror, and drama or something. Like I said, that's where it's a little harder to read, but whatever I'm getting out of this book in terms of a story, so far I'm entertained by it. So, what's it about? We open on this character named Daniel, who is like a writer, graphic designer of some kind that gets fired as like a part of our opening scene. This really gets into Perez and Spicer's strength as color, like as an art team. Spicer's coloring gives the scenes life, but also he's able to really change his color schemes to reflect different scenes and moods. So we open with like a bright, colorful palette, and then like on page 3, we get into a nightlife with neon lights and puke on the pavements and that sort of thing. And he does a good job at making objects and coloring stand out in the right way as we go through this book. Meanwhile, Perez is good at really conveying human emotion, and that's really strong in a series that like flourishes in that to a degree. So Daniel gets fired, and then page 3 he goes out drinking and ends up puking on the pavement, and it's all the stuff I just said. He gets into an argument with, I believe, the bouncer. The bouncer tells him, well, to F off, and Daniel proceeds to throw a punch at him, and then wakes up the next morning with a black eye and little memory of what else happened next. His friend basically rescued him and dragged him back to his place, and amusingly took Daniel's bed and left Daniel to sleep on the couch, which I thought was just a great little touch and kind of helps us to introduce this guy, like his buddy, and they are both, I should say, Daniel suddenly gets a letter from a courier. It's not like it's specifically to be delivered at a certain time, and we then go into the first chapter of like this story, where basically Daniel has been told his great grand aunt, sorry, I had to get that right, Margaret Smith passed away, and he is going to get a certain amount from her estate if they go to the town of Stillwater May 15th, 2019. So they're off driving to do that. They talk about how weird it all is, because it really does. And there's no way Zdarsky wrote this unaware, but it's very like almost a cliche. Short of it being a trip to a haunted house, it really is just following along those lines. Um, but they treat it like a bit of an adventure and a trip, and with Daniel being fired, it just you might as well go and potentially get some money. So they make their way there. They ask at a gas station if this woman like knows about Stillwater, and she does just says nope, and they move on. Eventually, they do get there, but oh yeah, there's no road signs for it. Yeah, and on their but they do eventually find their way, and on their way they get pulled over, and the cops kind of clearly uninterested in them coming to this town, but he he kind of lets them off without a ticket, even though it's not clear that if they were doing anything wrong. Like he's clear, like it's just, and he very much says he hasn't pulled somebody over in like a year because it's just such a small, insular little town that nobody knows this. And then he warns them that a curfew kicks in at 8 p.m. So this is it sets the tone for this community in an interesting way. Um. Anyway, okay, so they arrive at the town, and uh, they ask at like a local diner about the lawyer they're supposed to meet, this Joel Peterson. And okay, I was looking for the guy's name because Daniel's traveling with his buddy, and it's Tony. And to be fair, it's not really referenced until this point. Uh, but while Daniel's talking to the waitress at the diner, Tony sees these two kids fighting on a rooftop across the street. Oh, hey, Bucket Think Tank, thanks for joining us. You just missed the last stream we did, as I saw your comment about that. So I'm glad you could make it. We are talking about an indie series called Stillwater, for those joining us, because we've had quite a few more people trickle in there. So this guy named Tony and his friend Daniel see these kids fighting on a rooftop. Tony shouts at the kids to get down from there because obviously it's not very safe, and they're like pushing each other at the edge of the rooftop. And they watch as like the two boys stop, hear Tony shout this, and in response, one of the boys pushes another right off the edge of the roof. And the two see this stun, they go run up to this boy, and he's like bleeding and appears to have a broken neck, but his eyes move, so he is clearly alive. And like they shout for help. There's plenty of people in the street, and no one gives a crap. So at this point, like as a reader, just alarm bells going right off. There's something creepy about this town. The two take the boy to a doctor's office they spot, and this older gentleman kind of comes in to and he's like, oh, what's the problem? And they're like, who are you guys? And they're like, who cares? You got to help this kid. And they're like, oh, okay, give this young man some room. But the boy just gets up, looks at them, appears to be fine, and just runs off. The doctor pauses for a moment and then has this great line. Get in your car and go. Please, you have to trust me. This will not end well otherwise. I can't protect you. No one can. And Daniel leaves immediately without saying a word. He asks this random dude, like just in in a vest and like a little fisherman's hat, hosing down the street where the kid was bleeding. And he's like, where'd the kid go? And the guy just doesn't say anything. He just looks bewildered. And then the cop shows up and he's like, all right, that's enough. I knew you'd be trouble. And then all of a sudden, Tony notices that Daniel's black eye is completely healed from this morning. And the cop punches Daniel in the gut, and he goes sprawling to the ground. They get into a bit of a brawl, but like they just proceed to it's a cop, and he took Daniel by surprise. He clearly subdues the man, getting him beaten up for the second time in this one issue, and they both get tied up and basically hauled off. They are, and here's an interesting moment. They're driven outside of the borders of Stillwater, and the cop just says like, "You can't kill me. You can't kill any of us." They're all clearly like immortal or something in this town. But the second they cross the borders, people can die. And he proceeds to shoot Tony in the face, and they throw his body on this bonfire they've started. And this gets into the coloring I was talking about with Mike Spicer. At this time, it's just gone nuts, and it's just like surrounded by the fires of the bonfire. And just as they're about to kill Daniel, this woman drives up and shouts like, "Wait!" and runs up and says, "My boy," and embraces him. Clearly, I think it's his mom or something like that. And then that's the end of the first book. But in a fun little moment, I flipped a couple pages and saw a little preview they did of The Walking Dead fully colorized, but in a book about potentially undead beings. I flipped to that page and freaked right out. I was like, whoa, what happened in this story? Or I thought it was like a preview of what's coming up in the next issue. And then I realized, oh wait, no, this is that scene from The Walking Dead. And then I figured out what I was looking at. But oh boy, a fun little kicker at the end that isn't actually relevant to the plot, but still. So that's the story. If you can't tell, there's a strong level of horror to it, but also like this mystery. I really don't know what to make of it in a broader, like, what to define this story as. But for a first issue, a little floppy, like a little bit longer than usual, I guess, but or at least it feels that way. This was solid through and through. I really liked it. I thought they did a good job at letting you really get to know Daniel as a character. I think there's a pretty good hook to this thing. The way it's structured, I would assume or hope this is a limited series, because I wouldn't particularly want this to drag out too much. It's robustly mature. I just noticed that flipping on the back. But also something I forgot to mention, it's co-published with Skybound, which I found interesting because they're ones to like adapt things into video games and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the plan here, but I assume it's part of a line of stuff along the lines of like what Netflix does to develop ideas in the comic book world. And if so, that's cool. This has a lot of potential in that regard. So, certainly recommended. It's hard to go wrong with a Zdarsky comic and with strong artists like Perez and Spicer going on. It's pretty cool. This is the other side of indie books. I had been kind of going beyond the Image brand to check out stuff along the lines of Vault Comics, Scout, who I'd never even heard of before, and a couple others along like in that direction. And you can see those reviews. I'll put on little buttons for that. But in terms of Image, you really get the top tier, most experienced comic book writers and artists putting out truly original work, which, you know, isn't anything, shouldn't be news to anybody. But it's just kind of fun to take a step back in that direction after kind of branching out a little bit and getting some mixed success. Image tends to be more reliable, but it isn't always. Not every Image book I read I totally like or whatever. This one had a lot going for it just based on this cover alone, which looks cool, by the way. It's the skeletal mother embracing a baby with like a creepy image of a heart and veins branching out under city streets, which are clearly, well, not city streets, the town of Stillwater. And I feel like that mother-son dynamic is going to be explored more in the future based on this book's ending. So, check it out if you'd like, or if this review interests you, or if you've already read it, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Thanks for joining me, Bucket Think Tank, and everyone else who's been live streaming with me. And for the rest of you watching after, thanks for watching as well. We'll see you guys next time here on Comic Island.